before I start going over 17776, I just wanted to say that if you have not read any of the work, please do so now. 17776 is absolutely worth the read, and I'm going to be spoiling everything. I have a link to it in the description. Go ahead and read it. It's completely free. We live in bad times. I know this is an observation that anyone with sensory perception can tell, but it's an observation that I think requires repeating. The suffering and problems that we face are made normal within the systems of power that plague us. There was never another option, and this is just what you get when you exist in these places. As Nietzsche once said, to live is to suffer, and the more suffering you do, the more living it is. Americans in particular have this condition of inescapable problems within the current state of events. I can think of no other country that is, for lack of a better word, cucked into its problems. We don't give our people healthcare and let them die on the streets. The cost of living has greatly increased while wages have not. Wealth inequality is at a comical high, and those who are exploited by those who have the wealth are put into horrific conditions. We find ourselves against each other, even though we are all the same. We are all people that smile and cry and are alive and will die. We are connected by definition, but so much gets us separated. I think it's fit that the sport that defines my country is football. American football may be the most brutal team sport in terms of long-term injuries. It tears people up, destroys their bodies, and it's considered one of the things that Americans have the most pride, love, and identity with. This team-based sport where we focus on individual greatness involving the demolishment of the human body. In all honesty, it fits. It's a brilliant metaphor. To quote the sports writer John Boyce, "Both are beautiful, and both destroy people. They are designed to create misery. They are both institutions that I want to love unconditionally, but cannot possibly." This last sentence is one that really messes me up. Anarchists, communists, egoists, those that have a progressive view on the world and want to dissolve the current state of things. I don't think fundamentally we want to hate America. I want to love this country, embrace it, be proud of what it is, but I just can't. Our hatred is born out of a concern, out of a wish for things to get better, a wish to get rid of the contradictions that will eventually destroy all that we have. When I look at this country and the people that inhabit it, I cannot help but think that something is terribly wrong. 1776, written by John Boyce, starts with a similar concern, not for America, but for its metaphoric-laden pastime of football. It's clear that the sport of football needs to change, and the $64,000 question, my friends, is simple. How? Something is terribly wrong. The writing is on the wall. Youth participation in the sport is down, thanks in large part to the parents' concern for their health. In recent years, the NFL has Something is Terribly Wrong. In response to numerous clinical studies regarding something is terribly wrong, the league has taken action and something is terribly wrong. Oh no, something is terribly wrong. Do you hear that? Do not be afraid, but something is terribly wrong. I'm afraid that this page is going to disintegrate. Don't worry, nothing will be hurt, although you may be extraordinarily confused. I think I see a calendar. That is how 17776 starts. A head writer of a news website asks the question of what a game will look like in the future, and the article dissolves away and we are left with a calendar. Hopefully you've already read the first chapter of 17776. If not, please do that now. But I'll touch up on the basic details. 9, 10, and Juice are all satellites and space probes looking down at Earth, trying to see how humanity has changed in the past 15,000 years. 9 has just awoken from a long slumber and is having to get used to all the weird ways that human beings are now. One of the main odd things that is pointed out time and time again within 17776 is that human beings are immortal and have developed tiny machines called nanos, which eliminate all fear of death. They have the ability to give you food, they have the ability to filter out air. Human beings have also figured out how to be post-scarcity and even post-suffering. This is as utopian as human beings can get. Immortal creatures with no worries in the world. This future, however, is missing some of the essential bits of what we would consider to be a future utopia. For an example, people on Earth still know what a sidewalk is. They still play football, maybe at a different scale, but they still even know what that is. No human beings seem to be cyborgs or anything like that, and instead what we have is something very normal. Human beings are, of course, different. They are immortal beings that can no longer reproduce, but there is some oddities there. Arguably, the stuff on humans is the main focus of 17776, but the full title is 17776, An American Football Story. So clearly, all that stuff about humans that is mentioned later on is just, coincidental and doesn't actually mean anything. This is actually a story about football, so let's talk about football in the future. Let's start with number 1, Koy Detmer Ball. A much more niche game than compared to cross-country football. Koy Detmer was an obscure backup quarterback who signed a couple of footballs over his playing career. He signed enough footballs that these footballs were abundant but still rare. The game centers around finding all of these balls and being in possession of all of them at the same time. Once that happens, whoever has all the balls wins. This sounds normal, but eventually results in theft, car accidents, hacking, and other insane escapades to be able to get the balls and win the game. It is football in a very loose sense, perhaps football adjacent or football centric rather than, good and proper football, but it is interesting to see what immortal beings obsess over. A resource that cannot be replicated being fought over by people so obsessed that they are willing to T-bone other players going 50 miles per hour just to be able to claim victory. 17776 is a world that is post-scarcity and post-suffering. Most of the people that inhabit it don't have to worry about anything anymore. They don't need to worry about something not being available that would be absolutely necessary. If there's something that they want, they can get it. So they have to come up with ways to be able to have a limited resource. And then we find these insane lengths that people will go in order to get that resource. This is a theme that I will bring up later, but for now, just keep a pin in this. Another version of football is 500 ball. Now, I know that Boyce is a Midwest kid like me if he's mentioning 500. For those of us who did not grow up in middle of nowhere, Ohio, where there was a cornfield closer to you than any hospital, grocery store, or library, 500 is a game where you throw a ball up in the air and give it a numerical significance. Whoever reached 500 and caught balls first got to be the one to throw the ball up in the air, and this is how we passed time in recess when we weren't allowed to play kickball. 500 has grown a bit in the past 15,000 years. It has a developed meta, and there are strategies to be able to get 500 balls and know where the balls will land. This knowledge is important because 500 is even more expansive and nationwide than any other sport in 17776. This is because the ball is launched from a cannon in Alaska and can land anywhere in the continental United States. Whoever touches the ball gets the points. The insanity is clear. It's the equivalent of finding out that rock, paper, scissors has a meta. Oh, pro tip, if your opponent likes anime, then there's a high likelihood that they will throw scissors. Trust me on that. It is one of the funniest things in the stories, and it's emblematic of how time will just add more and more ways of taking something to the absurd, but it does have significance outside of a joke. Randomness is very difficult to find when you have 15,000 years of experience in the world. Life can sometimes be very samey, and nothing brings randomness like the possibility of a giant cannonball hitting somewhere random in the United States. It's also a way to go to places that you've never been. 500's randomness makes it so that anywhere in the United States could be points. It opens up the world, though I think this message is found more profoundly in number 3. Cross-country football is football taken to a comical scale. In this form, football is a trek across nature and cities. It represents a chaotic game of tag, the freedom to move through an entire state, except in cases of odd errors that podcasters talk about. Our 21st century football is nothing more than a petri dish, so controlled, so limited in its scope, every variable monitored and observed by experts. With cross-country football, so many new elements must be added on. accounting for things like terrain, the ability to get lost in the city, natural disasters in the middle of an offensive push, and all the uncontrolled elements that nature can throw at anyone. It is football taken out of this hyper-controlled laboratory, allowed to spread its legs and finally move. The football player now gets to interact with the entire land, learn its stories. This is another theme that is all around 1776, the stories that are found everywhere on Earth. The freedom and expansiveness of cross-country football is contrasted by number 4, Game 27. Game 27 is interesting, but it also feels inherently wrong. It is a football game taking place in a football stadium, but it goes off the rails from there. Over the course of a game that's been going on for 15,000 plus years, something has, gone terribly wrong. The rulebook got thicker and thicker. Computers and philosophers had to be brought in to be able to understand what it even means to be in possession of the ball. The rulebook was filled with layered problems, lots of contradictions. Where have I heard of that before? The ball itself has been lost, but that doesn't matter anymore. Game 27 only takes place in a football stadium. It is a game based on territory control now. This is because a player was able to look through the rules and say that they were actually able to own parts of the field, leading to an all-out land race. These territories hold such things as 2 separate skyscrapers, housing units for out-of-towners, Bojangles, yes, in Colorado, an autonomous zone created by fans who wanted browned mustard as a condiment in the stadium, a statue of the poet Sir Walter Raleigh. To quote Juice, "Is there any explanation you could possibly find satisfactory?" Football is turned into this game of opposing forces that own land that they claim ownership over, fighting for resources in other territories whilst not trying to do full-fledged war on each other, unless it would be a shoo-in guaranteed victory in their minds. If it isn't obvious, this is Boyce's metaphor for capitalism. This is what capitalism is in this world. Juice has a line on this. Things went a different direction in America, and thank God for that, but capitalism deserves a zoo like this one. It's a beast in the wild as any grizzly bear with fawn's blood in its mouth. I think you see deeds and contracts and bureaucratic bloat, and you think that something went wrong. Something was always wrong, y'all. I love it. I love to watch it in a zoo where it can't hurt me. It's important to note that capitalism and how it works is much more complicated than people just being in possession of land, fighting each other for more land, whilst also having Bojangles, but this is besides the point. I did not make this essay to quote Bordiga. Capitalism is not the focus of this story. It is football, but also some stuff about humans, some stuff about space. Let's go past football. I want to talk about space. This event, second in importance to no other, not even the splitting of the atom, would have been greeted with unmitigated joy if it had not been for the uncomfortable military and political circumstances attending it. But curiously enough, this joy was not triumphal. It was not pride or awe at the tremendousness of human power and mastery which riled the hearts of men, who, now, when they looked up from the earth towards the skies, could behold there a thing of their own making. The immediate reaction, expressed on the spur of the moment, was relief about the first step towards escape from men's imprisonment to the earth. And this strange statement, far from being the accidental slip of some American reporter, unwittingly echoed the extraordinary line which, more than 20 years ago, had been carved on the funeral obelisk of one of Russia's great scientists. Mankind will not remain bound to the earth forever. One of the striking things about 17776 is that the story is told from the perspective of space probes. It is odd, but I find it to be a fascinating metaphor. 9 launched in 1968 and awoke in 17776 to find humans still playing football. It's ludicrous that they would even know what football is in the first place, or that 9 can even understand what these humans are doing. The main reason that 9 is so confused has to do with the reason of why she was built in the first place. 9 is a space probe built to be able to understand how space works and what is even out there in the first place. Humans have a long and romantic history with space. Nothing is more beautiful than that unknown sitting comfortably over our heads every waking day and night. A particular group has an affinity for space, and those would be the communists. But Space presents something more grand than just science for communists. It represents the greatest reset imaginable. I think that a large number of communists, anarchists, those who want to dissolve the current state of things, view the current world as a failure, a full-blown failure. Perhaps it is due to my pessimistic and nihilistic leanings, but I don't think we're fixing this world in time to stop its collapse, whatever that collapse entails. It's not an all-or-nothing game, of course. I highly recommend everyone read Desert, but climate change is not going to fix itself in time for billions to not be affected by, and I don't mean to do this as a joke, the Industrial Revolution and its consequences. The world is corrupt, and it feels corrupted, unsavable, and the easiest thing to do when a file is corrupted is to start a new save, and that can be done in space. Space communism fixates on that second chance, a movement to something else, a chance for a do-over, a chance to take all these mistakes that we have cataloged and finally make them feel like they served a purpose, to give them a payoff. Even more so, there's that wish for something else to be out there, another species that we can learn from, that we can befriend. These romantic dreams are sadly mostly trapped to just that, romance, fiction. The nearest star to us is 40 trillion kilometers away, and we are not reaching that anytime soon, even with immortality. This is the point that 10 makes and 9 is so confused by. 9 and 10 have been flying into space for millennium now, and neither have found anything, not a single thing, and probably never will. I remember when I was talking to one of my uni professors who watched the moon landing live on TV while it was happening. She described it as one of the greatest moments of her life, an event that made all limits just dissolve. Humans could move past humanity, and I would love to have been there to see that otherworldly spur of emotions. It's just so horrific that we have to deal with all this space, these voids where only a handful of atoms exist per square foot. It's just too much for us, at least not without faster-than-light travel. It's a bust. I think this is what shakes 9 up so badly about humans still playing football. Pioneer 9, Pioneer 10, Jupiter, Icy Moon Explorer, all these machines have no purpose. If space is not where we are going, then 9's entire existence, this rational being's purpose, is completely taken away. However, 9 is not alone in this regard. The other probes have to deal with this, of course, but I'm referring to the humans. They are trapped in the same kind of problem, where there are no more problems to fix, no more suffering to overcome, no missions to be done, and no way to escape to new problems. The probes can relate to the humans. Both purposes have been reduced to hanging out until the end of time.
And we wonder, could there be life waiting for Pioneer? Dreamers think so, children too. Buffy Glazer was born the very day Pioneer was launched 11 years ago. She believes in life out there somewhere.
Maybe because I want it to exist. I don't know if I think, I just want it to. I want something out there.
One of the things you hear most about humans is how their short lifespan is a freeing thing that makes humans such an amazing species. That the knowledge of death is what keeps humans fresh. That feeling of youth and wild change is what drives humanity forward. Our mortality is not just considered natural, it's considered definitionally human. Boys plays with that in 1776 in a very obvious way by taking away that human thing. We no longer die and we no longer reproduce. I'm sure that in 2026, the philosophers of the world were losing their minds, but this is an event that John Boyce does not share with us. What is shared with us is how the people of 17776 feel now. People who feel the current immortal moment to be natural. We do see some of the past. There are references to 7170s fashion, which involved slap bracelets and bowling shoes. But there are more important things here. 10 tells 9 in the intermission that humanity has already reached its stereotypical utopia. Flying cars, giant cities, a full automated luxury space post-capitalism utopia. And this was abandoned. We already mentioned why space didn't go exactly according to plan, but why would they roll back this fully automated luxury? Well, it wasn't out of a sense of nostalgia, it was a sense of not having anything to worry about. To quote 10, people wanted to walk. They wanted to take the bus that smelled like cigarettes. They wanted those precious 3 minutes between asking the question and knowing the answer. I think you underestimate how exhausting it is to think big. You can only hold grand ambitions above your shoulders for so long before you get tired. And they got tired. Some lasted longer than others, but they all got tired. Now they're resting in a moment that will last until the end of time. The ideas of utopia were found to be uncomfortable. Those who achieved utopia found it to be self-defeating in its purpose. It had to be rolled back so humans could feel normal again. The thing that really gets me about this is that humans did not achieve everything. There were, of course, still those things that could not be broken. You keep assuming that time guarantees something, that infinite time equals infinite everything, but it doesn't. No one was able to travel faster than light. There was nowhere else to go. It's that awkward moment in Fallout New Vegas where you 100% complete everything. There's nothing else that the vanilla game can offer, just the land and the people are left. Honestly, that should be good enough. People had a choice. They could continue wandering through the endless darkness, in absence of everything they loved, an empty void of disappointment and loneliness. Or they could look down and embrace what they've always had in love. Life on Earth is now about how to fill up a limitless resource. Time has no meaning. Thankfully, things like Wikipedia still exist, so the pursuit of knowledge is, not completely dead. The thing that's most important to these people is play. Play is the ultimate form of distraction to people. It's how a large majority of our named characters deal with immortality. A lot of characters are completely different in terms of their coping mechanisms, but they all share that feeling of having to fill the time of immortality with some form of game. The thing about games is that it seems to be a release for a lot of players in this world. A release of feelings that they no longer feel. Boyce makes it apparent in 17776 that the feeling of loss is gone from a society that is immortal, but I think another feeling is gone that is a lust. A lust for being better than someone else. Competition in the world of 17776 is an odd display. It makes sense for some of the players to be obsessed, such as cross-country football players who are stuck in a valley for thousands of years trying to score a touchdown whilst constantly failing to climb over a cliff. That's clearly a Sisyphus reference of some type, but that eternal torment is actually great because it gives you something to do others may not be so lucky. Where it gets weird for me is in Koi Detmerball, where seemingly normal people just freak out, do attempted murder by automobile, break and enter, and hack into other players' computers, completely bricking them and stealing their information. I feel like play is something cathartic. It gives something that cannot be gotten in a post-scarcity, post-suffering world. The ability to win, to be better than someone else. There's this lust for domination that's inherent within modern capitalist society. When revolution is not on the mind of the worker, all that can be thought for the betterment of life is either death in the worst of cases, or to be up with the capitalist class itself. I'm bullshitting right now, by the way. I haven't even read Foucault. Sport, especially in the long-term sense of something like cross-country football, something that takes thousands of years, presents a freedom and randomness that cannot be replicated. Multiple humans agreeing to a set of rules and playing out those rules will always result in something new. Maybe not something truly new, but something rearranged in an interesting way at the very least. Play almost seems to be a pure time waster. Boyce points out in his question and answer for 17776, nobody in 17776 ever scores a touchdown. It's like they are just focused on spending the time. Randomness and the unknown are the most valuable things in this world. Right up there with the importance of finding time to waste in the first place. Randomness in the story can be found through 500 and the character Lucretia Evans. Evans is a legendary 500 player who's played longer than any other player and has not gotten a single point. A 10,000-year career with nothing to show for it. Evans is the butt of many jokes, but in the end, she's almost thankful in a way that the game hasn't gone in a positive direction for her. A long, long time ago, I realized something about myself. I always have to have some kind of goal to work towards. Doesn't matter how stupid or trivial it is, there's Just has to be a well-defined objective with a clear delineation between success and failure. The randomness of 500 has been rough on Evans, but fundamentally she has been appreciative of it. It gives her that beast to deal with, something a lot of people do not get in this immortal life. To quote 10, "I think they're doing the best they can with immortality. A human being will rarely admit this to you, but they tend to be terrified of living forever. They were born and raised with the understanding that their lives would end. They've achieved everything they wanted to achieve, all the ills that plagued them. Now boredom is their enemy, and they get up in the morning and fight it every day of their eternal lives. Recreation and play sustain them. Football sustains them, and if you find yourself in a football game that's such a gargantuan task that seems unbeatable, that will claim eons of your time and your passion, I think that makes you one of the lucky ones." One of the most beautiful parts of this story is when Evans is riding to collect her first points. It's an absolute highlight in my opinion. Something I didn't get to talk about too much in this essay, and I'll just interject here off the script, is just how much character Boyce is able to put into these characters. He's an incredible sports writer and analyst, but he is also an incredible fiction writer and is very unsung in that regard. Randomness is also found in how 500 Ball can just be, put a ball in a place where no one's been or has rarely gotten to. Jacob Geller talks all about this in his video. I linked that in the description. I highly recommend it. He's one of the best to ever do it. The theme of the unknown is best shown in the insanity that is Eddie Krieger. Krieger locked himself away in a cave in Louisville, Kentucky. He did it to win a football game because, of course he did. He's a character in 17776. He has been hidden for 9,313 years, and in this time, he has only known this cave as his home, has only eaten granola bars that the nanos make for him, and, most offensive of all, has entertained himself only by understanding the cave itself and playing Double Dribble. It's Double Dribble, one of the old handheld Konami games. The screen is, you can barely even call it a screen. It's just a printed picture of a basketball court and a few LCD illuminations that flip on and off in front of it. Way back when it was made, my grandson showed it to me. I never played a video game in my life. I figured I was too old for that business, but I played it and played it. You're this little guy. You have to dribble around the defenders and score. That's the whole game. You get to 99 points, you win. It takes some time to really get the hang of it, but not that much time. Tell you the truth, you play it for a couple of weeks and you've got it down. You never miss a shot. So I made this game where I tried to beat it as fast as I could. And I tried to beat my own record. Got this little timer with me. I'd hit the button with my foot to start it, and then as soon as I'd get to 99, I'd stop it. And eventually I realized that it was impossible to beat the game any faster than 3 minutes, 18 seconds. For about a year, I tried to beat it faster than 3:18, and I just couldn't do it. So I'd see if I could beat it in an exact time, like exactly 5 minutes, or exactly 20 minutes and 7 seconds. The insanity here is obvious. Imagine if Cheese was beating Mario 64 in exactly 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 36 seconds. It's absolutely horrific stuff. Krieger is met with a missionary who wishes to know every person along a certain latitude, and Krieger is very much against this. Krieger says that not knowing something is incredibly difficult to do when you're immortal, and that any bit of mystery you encounter should stay to keep that human spirit alive, because unlearning something is much more difficult than remembering. Yet, in this worldview, Krieger is himself overly attentive to details. He notices every bit of his cave, the way the cracks form, the way the beetles crawl. He knows that this lost cave exists, and all the details that are within it. This is why he cares so much about other information being limited. Let those who have the whole world be lost within it. To quote from Krieger again, "It's my little speck of the world I know, and I love it to bits." Another quote from Juice also does this idea justice. "If you ask me, there's a scarcity of uncertainty on Earth. I mean, what do you do if you find out you're going to live forever and you're never going to live on another world? And you're never going to see heaven or hell, and you're never going to be a cyborg with laser cannons for arms and shit. Your finished form is the one that mows the lawn. So you sort of snap back into that so that your life can be defined somehow. All the while ignoring all the loose change of uncertainty that's still lying around. This actually transitions into the biggest message of 17776. The main theme of 17776 and of all of John Boyce's work is that stories are everywhere and all of them are worthy of being told. This theme is everywhere in his work, from the Bob Emergency saying that every Bob plays a note in this symphony, or how Dorktown articles aren't really about sports feats, but odd stories that deserve to be told, and use mathematics not in a way to show something impressive, but something that matters. John Boyce loves a good story above everything else, and this feeling is best shown through the character of Nancy McGunnell. Nancy is a cross-country football-playing champion. Our first introduction to her in the story is when she is swept up by a tornado in the middle of an offensive play and is shot out of the tornado towards Bee, Nebraska, where she hears the story of the Bee State Ballroom, a ballroom made entirely out of leftover sidewalk concrete built entirely by Dutchmen, drawn up in the middle of a night by a man purely passionate about his project. Nancy is clearly in love with this story. She has a love for the world that she inhabits. She has this line that I always think about whenever I think of 17776. I was thinking, I have no idea where this thing is going to throw me, but I know I'm going to land on top of a story. I wonder if there's a single place in the whole world that's never had a story. I bet not. I just about guarantee you there's no places like that in America. Every square of it, every place you stomp your foot, that's where something's happened. Something wild, maybe something nobody knows about, but something. You'd fall out of the sky and right into some forgotten storybook. You run and run and run and keep turning pages, and none of them are empty. They're all full of stories. There's nowhere left to write. I think I'm just a bookmark. Nancy finds infinity to be easy to fill. In fact, she finds it difficult to fill in any more of the stories in the world. The world is rich with experiences, so much so that Nancy feels that she has no way to make stories of her own, but she does have the ability to hear these stories, to experience them from her perspective. However, there are always new pages, and there are always new stories to tell and new stories to get sucked into. In fact, in the land of 17776, there are some spots in the continental United States where no human being has ever stood. There are completely blank pages in the United States, and yet the fact that no stories have happened on those coordinates is itself a story. 17776 is presented to the reader as a series of short stories. Juice takes us to see all of these individual moments in their beautiful world. Nancy herself loves that about her sport. It lets her get close to these stories that she cares so much about, with this world and the people that mean everything to her. She has another line that makes me love her just so much. And they spend hundreds of years getting to know the hell out of it. Now, to me, football is a further exercise in getting to know and love this world, this planet, you know? The actual ground. It's so rich with history. It's just embarrassing. John Boyce has a line in the Q&A for 17776 where he says that, I think 17776 might get one thing right about the future. We're never going to leave the solar system. Humanity's technological advancements over the last 150 years has been almost frightening, but that's a small speck of time. I think we'll eventually hit a wall, and that wall will be we can't travel into deep space ourselves. Too much distance, too much radiation, and too little incentive. If that ends up being the case, we'll have nothing to do but solve our problems on Earth. I'm being really optimistic when I guess that we might someday. After we do that, we're gonna want our games, our art, and each other. One day we might see those as the only reason we're here. The world that Boyce makes is not necessarily dystopian or utopian. It's as utopian as any society can be. It's post-scarcity and post-suffering, but no one feels that way, or at least no one feels that way anymore. The Missionary has a line that a lot of people like to quote when they talk about 17776. But I don't think so, but I think about it. And I think, well, I can't be. Because I'm like you, and I kind of look at the big, long life ahead of me that stretches out forever and disappears, and I get scared. And I think that this can't be heaven if I'm getting scared, right? And then I think maybe this is heaven. And heaven is scary. Very few people seem satisfied with the world in 17776. It is an unsung truth and unwritten information passed from generation to generation. Humans do two things: they reproduce and they die. We are secretly given this information our entire lives, and then for the characters of this story, it turns out to not be true. All of this information passed during the time that your brain was this sponge grabbing everything that it can hold on to. It was all bullshit. That realization affects everyone in 17776, but it doesn't ruin the world for these people. Boyce talks at length in the Q&A for 17776 about what he calls death worship in modern fiction. Modern fiction, and I would argue modern politics, have a love for violence. Violence and misery is everywhere. We are bombarded with it in our fiction as much as we are within our news. The world is full of cynics and those that cannot get out that feeling of impending doom. Hell, I even brought it in a tad earlier on in this essay. Boyce wants to get away from this, move to something else. A world where we are finally able to put aside our differences, the things that divide us, and realize once and for all that we are all stuck together and all of us have the ability to fix the current problems that plague us. Of course, it may take us becoming immortal and having our escapades with Scape fail to make us realize such a truth, but it is something we can hold on to. Even if the world that Boyce paints is not utopian in the sense of this grand satisfaction, I think we can hope for something a little bit better in the future. It's weird to say that in the modern era, a piece of fiction that has an ending that says maybe things can get better is something worth writing home about, but I genuinely think it is. There's a phrase in the Q&A that makes me quite sad. It's John Boyce talking about what led him to make 17776 the way it was. I wanted a world to escape to once in a while, and it couldn't be one of those. He's referring to 24 Game of Thrones, typical fiction pieces focused on suffering. I didn't want a utopia by any means, but I wanted a world where I could dwell on things that were bizarre, fascinating, and maybe even funny. I hope we can get there too. Hey, like, comment, subscribe, share, whatever, all the typical YouTube stuff. If you know people that like this, share it. This section actually is more just for me being mad I could not fit into the script all the talk about the Browns. I'm a Cleveland boy, and let me tell you, all that stuff about how only a terminally ill cancer patient can relate to the worst football team to ever exist. Oh, it's so fine, so good. But yeah, like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much.